This week begins a few weeks of learning increases and decreases. Now I've done one row of this so you can kind of see what you're going to be creating. So as you can see, it has little holes. These holes are called yarn overs. They're very, very easy to do, and they're very common. Anytime you make anything with lace, your shawls, it would be triangular or asymmetrical shawls, a lot of them will have this. And sometimes when it's row after row of yarn overs, it creates like a mesh lace, which is what we're going to make today. And like I said, it looks complicated, but it's actually extremely simple. So let's get started. Your very first stitch, you're just going to knit. So you're just knitting one stitch. Now when you knit, as you remember, your yarn is held behind you. But to create a yarn over, you're actually going to bring that yarn right in between the needles, like you would when you were going to purl. So it's sitting in front. The next stitch is a knit stitch. Now, if I only did one stitch, the scarf would get wider and we would create a triangle. However, because we want this to stay 50 stitches across as a scarf or cowl, we want to have a decrease for every increase that we do so that we maintain that 50 stitches. So what we're going to do is a simple decrease. This, right by doing this, creates your yarn over because the next stitch will make the hole. So the next stitch is simply knitting 2 stitches together. You're going to do the same knit stitch that you've already learned, but instead of doing one stitch, you're going to go through 2 stitches. So you can see here, I have 2 stitches on my needle right there. The yarn is in the front. I just bring it around the back of the back needle, and I just complete the stitch. And now you can see there's this little curved stitch. It kind of slants. You can see it right there. That's your yarn over, and you can see underneath it has created a hole. So let's do that again. You bring the yarn from the back. You're just going to bring it right between the needles so that it's now in the front. Then you're going to knit 2 stitches together. So I'm picking up 2 stitches. The yarn is still in the front. I just bring it to the back, wrap it around the back needle the same as I would with a knit stitch. Bring both of those stitches over the top and off the other side. Now I'm going to put up on the screen what a yarn over, how it looks when it's written, and what knit 2 together, which is what this stitch is, what those 2 would look like in a knitting pattern. And you're going to do this all the way across until you have 1 stitch left on the needle, and the last stitch you're just going to do a knit stitch. So let's go a couple more together and then I'll let you do it on your own. Bring the yarn between the 2 needles, pick up 2 stitches, bring the yarn around from the back, and knit those 2 stitches. So those 2 stitches have now become, you can see it's 1 stitch now. So we've done a decrease to balance out the increase. Bring the yarn to the front, knit 2 stitches together so that they become 1. And you're going to go all the way across until you have only 1 stitch remaining, and that last stitch you will just do a knit stitch, no yarn over in front of it. Alright, I'm down to my last stitch. This was the knit 2 together. This time I am not going to do a yarn over at this end, otherwise I would end up with 51 stitches. So this last stitch, I'm just going to knit 1. So all the way across you have knit 1, which is your first stitch, and then you have yarn over, knit 2, all the way across to the last stitch, which is a knit 1. And this is what it would look like on a pattern. When we flip this over, this was done on the right side. You can see I have my little progress keeper right there so I can keep track of what the front is from the back. I'm now going to turn my work and we're going to do the back side of our work. Now you could do either a knit all the way across or you could purl all the way across. It really doesn't matter. In our case, we're going to purl across, but sometimes with a shawl, especially a shawl that's done in all garter stitch, you would knit across. But just for practicing with our purl stitches, since that's the harder of the two, we're going to purl all the way across. Now let me show you what you're going to do with those yarn overs. Here's our first yarn over stitch right here. You can see it slants a little bit different than your regular stitches. You're just going to take your right needle, you're just going to purl it the same as you would, or knit it the same. You're going to go right into the stitch, wrap around, just the same as you would with a regular knit stitch. Here's your knit stitch. And there's your purl. You're going to do the same with this one. It's just an open stitch. You can still take your right needle and go in between the open area, because if I take this off of the stitch, you can see, or off of the needle, you can see it's just a loop. It's not a completed stitch like this is, which is a closed loop. You can see that that's a closed loop. And a yarn over is an open loop. But you're going to treat it the same way going across. So your right needle just goes into the right-hand side here. And you're going to purl all the way across. You would have had your first row done. Now in my case I have 2 rows done because I did one ahead of time so you could see what they looked like. But here it is. You can see it's starting to form an open mesh. Now at this time, before you start your next row, you do want to count your stitches to make sure you did not inadvertently add one or take one away. So just count your stitches real quick to make sure you have 50. And then you're going to repeat these 2 rows for a total of 3 more times. So you will have 8 rows total when you're done. So you will have, and you can count your rows by counting how many holes you've done. Like I've done 4 so far, and it takes 2 rows to create a hole. So I have 1, and here's the second one right there. So I've done a total of 4. So you're going to do a total of 3 more repeats of rows 1 and 2. And when you finish, you should be able to count 4 holes going up. And that is our lesson for this week.